Hello and welcome to this session on APIs. I think all of us have heard APIs, but for those who have not heard about APIs and who are not very sure about what APIs are, this session is for all of you. So what is actually an API? The API, you can think of API as basically a computer program or a server-side program which can be written in any language, but which serves some dynamic data which may be helpful for some people. So just as we know that there are web servers or HTTP servers which can serve static web pages, similarly, the APIs can serve dynamic data like maybe some dynamic location data, might be weather data, might be currency data, and many other kinds of data. And why it is dynamic? Because the data depends on the user request. So maybe we are requesting the weather for a particular place, it will actually supply the weather for that particular place. So that is why it is dynamic. It depends on the user request. And normally the APIs are serving data in the JSON format because JSON is the most popular format of data exchange between the client and the APIs. And nowadays, APIs also have become the most common way in which two systems can be integrated. Okay, so let's see some of the most widely used APIs of today's world. So I think all of us have definitely used at some point or the other the Google Maps API, which we can use to find out route, destination, or the Google Places API. And then there are also many other examples of API like Microsoft Graph API, via which you can actually find out details of an user and the details of the hierarchy of the user and so many other things. The PayPal API, the PayPal API can actually help you to know about invoices or orders or payments or transactions, everything. The GitHub API can actually help you to get information about the repositories, the users, issues, etc. Twitter API can help you to get information about tweets sent out by specific person, about also historical tweets, and ChatGPT API can actually help you to get more information, or rather to query ChatGPT with some specific prompt and to get responses back from it. However, most of these APIs require registration and some will also require some credit card info to start with. So we will explore some easier option of setting up an API in our own local environment and we will test with that. So we'll have a demo towards the end of this video. But before we go there, let us try to understand at a high level what are the different API methods and what are the API clients. The APIs, for most practical purposes, they closely resemble or they closely match with the HTTP requests. Now, if you are not very sure about the details of the HTTP request, there is a different video which I have on HTTP request. You can take a look at that. But coming back here, so just like HTTP requests have different methods like get, post, put, and delete, APIs also have similar methods for get, post, put, and delete, where get is the most commonly used one where we want to retrieve information from the API, like we want to retrieve location data, we want to retrieve user data. Post is when we want to create some information, like we want to create a payment or we want to create a booking, we want to create a transaction. Put is when we want to update that information, like update some payment details, and delete is when we want to remove some information. Maybe we want to delete some users or delete some transaction like that. And how do we interact with the API? For the get APIs, we can easily interact via our browser. But for the all other forms of API, we cannot interact with the browser. We need some kind of clients, and there are different kinds of clients. One is a command line utility, which is known as curl. It's available both in Windows and in Unix environments. Then there is also Postman, which is a very widely used app. And similarly, there is also HTTP. You can actually use any one of them. And also, any programming language like Java or JavaScript or Python or Golang, all of them provide multiple HTTP clients to interact with the API. Now, before we move on, I want to just mention one thing. There are also other HTTP methods, and And similarly, there are also other API types apart from the 4 listed here, but these 4 are the most used ones. Okay, so how can I develop an API? So in today's world, API development has become one of the most sought after skill set. So if you are a software developer, you will mostly, or there is a very high chance that will work on development of the API or development of the client of the API, development of the consumer of the API. In all the programming languages, there are popular frameworks which make API development very easy. Like in Java, there are multiple frameworks which include Spring Boot, Quarkus, Micronaut. In JavaScript, there are Node.js, Express, Next. In Python, there are also Flask and Django, and in Golang, there is Gin framework, also others. So with the help of these frameworks, you can actually get API up and running very easily. So they give you all the boilerplate or the low-level code, and you can write your own functional or business logic on top of that very easily. So what we are going to do in this session, in this video, is now we are going to see a mock API, because creating a mock API and querying it is easiest, fast step to actually understand what is an API and how can we also invoke the different types of API. Okay, so let us see how we can actually set up a mock API using this tool Mockun, and you can go to this URL. The URL will also be mentioned in the description, and you can download the version which is corresponding to your operating system. So I have downloaded for my operating system, and you can just click to start it. So here is the tool. So if you start it, then okay, I had already started the server, so I will stop the server. So on the left panel, you can see that it has already created some APIs for you. So this is a slash users endpoint, which is a get endpoint, and then you can also do a post here. So let us click here to start this mock server. Again, this is just a mock server, so it will actually create, it has some fake data which it will show. So if I click here, then it starts the server, and I can bring up my curl utility from the command line, and I can actually do a curl and then http localhost 3000/users. Why 3000? Because this runs, the mock server runs by default on that port. And if I do /users, it will show me, it will display a list of users, which is a JSON array. So now let us see how we can query the same API using another client, which is known as Postman, and which will give you a better formatted response. So this is Postman, and you can also download it from the Postman site. And here I'm making a GET request to the same API, and if I click send, then it will list all the users here. So it will actually list a JSON array of all the users. So that was invoking a GET endpoint. But now let us see how we can invoke a POST endpoint. So here there is an already created POST endpoint. Additionally, I created a rule here. So instead of GET, it would be POST request, and it would be content /text1. We get a status 200 response because that param1 is not equal to text1. So when the param1 was equal to text1, we get a response which says that the page was not found, which is this one again. And when the param1 is equal to text2, then I get a 200 response, which is a successful response. All because I set up this rule here. That again, this is just a faking, but very easy to set up and very easy to test, so that initially you will get a quicker understanding of. We have come to an end of this session. I hope it was useful, and I would request you to try out the mock API, the demo that I had shown, and that is also detailed out in my blog, which is mentioned below. And last but not the least, again, if you like my video and if you found it useful, please subscribe to my channel and also comment, so that would keep me motivated.